Hi, everybody. So I'm Jenny Brooker. I'm Chief Data Architect at Government Digital Service, which Mark talked about earlier. My role is very much around how UK government make better use of data, how do we get data flowing, and a big part of that is data architecture. And really excited to talk about both data architecture and information architecture today with my amazing colleague, Jody.
Hi everyone, my name is Jody Parker. I'm the head of Government Knowledge and Information Management at GDS also. So we deal in cross-government risks and opportunities in the knowledge and information management space. So in terms of information architecture, maybe a slightly different perspective to some of the other fantastic talks that have come today and are still to come. So we have strategic oversight of information architecture in terms of how it's deployed in the government knowledge and information domain. So we look particularly at information architecture as an enabler for civil servants to do their work. So in GDS, what my team in particular, what we really want is we really want civil servants to have access to all the information they need to do their jobs, to make really good decisions and to do great policy work. But also what we need is for all of that information to be really well governed, because obviously we've got a huge set of information law, ethics and transparency requirements that we need to take account of as well.
Brilliant. And I'm very, very happy, Rafaela, that you were the first one to sound the klaxon about AI so that we didn't have to do that. But we want to talk about information architecture, designing for meaning, but we want to put that in the context of all of the things that Jody and I are seeing in our roles around a kind of AI-enabled world. The most important kind of challenge that we see, and we're going to have an ask for you all at the end of this as well on our very final slide. But Jody, do you want to kind of kick us off just with how you see AI changing user behaviours?
Yeah, so I mean, this will be familiar to everyone on this call, but in government, we're talking about civil service behaviour. We're seeing a big behavioural shift. So these generative interfaces, which are powered like ChatGPT and Copilot, which are powered by large language models, they're moving us as users away from that classic search and retrieval process that we're all used to. So it's less about kind of simple search queries and more about that natural conversational based interactions with the information itself. So less about kind of those 2 or 3 keyword searches, and now about these prompts, which, you know, are much more complex. So they may frame a problem, we may describe our intent when we're prompting, we may give quite a bit of context as well. And actually what we expect as users back is we're expecting something quite sophisticated in return. So it's less about a list of links and it's more about synthesis. We're expecting recommendations, and actually we're expecting decision support. So that traditional model as civil servants of how we would have perhaps done our work, how we would have interacted with the information architecture is really changing. So traditionally we would have done, spent quite a bit of time searching. We'd have opened 5 documents, we'd have read a hell of a lot of stuff, done quite a lot of comparing, probably some copy and pasting and a lot of synthesizing. And during that, as a user, as you go through that process, you would be making some really important decisions about what to prioritize, what to trust and what to discount. And you'd be picking that up from signals about the location of the information, about what kind of format it was in and how it was presented to you. What we're seeing now is, of course, is that our effort and that cognitive load is increasingly being delegated to large language models. So now what users are saying to large language models, they're saying, give me an intelligent and reliable answer that I can use to make a decision. So artificial intelligence is becoming our thinking partner. It's kind of accompanying us at work and helping us to do our job. And so what that means is that users are now potentially barely interacting with source information, source documents at all. They may be barely seeing the underlying information architecture. So those two things are potentially starting to become more and more invisible to general users. And if users are seeking answers from information, that then brings up questions around trust. So how much can we trust those answers, and should we as users be trusting those answers? So I think seeing that shift towards that user shift towards give me an answer that I can use. I suppose, Jenny, a question for you is, are you seeing changes in how users are interacting with structured data? So do you think AI is going to empower more non-specialists to interact more with structured data?
Well, my favourite quote from somebody at one of our kind of community events was, well, AI is just me being able to chat to my data, right? That's all it is. But it's really interesting because, Jody, you're like on the unstructured data side. I sit very much in the world of data structures and data architects making, looking again kind of at the entities and what that should look like. But that's because we're structuring the data for machines to read, whereas all of the kind of documents and those kind of things are created for people to read. And I think that's the challenge that we have, is everyone just like expects to be able to interface with their databases and just like type stuff in and those kind of things. And so what you're getting is, actually, I think Rafaela like really goes back to all of those different layers. Like one of the things that I've seen is some of our AI engineers are creating things at the moment where they're trying to create that interface so that people can just have a chat and say, for my finance information, just tell me just give me a podcast on what that is. And you're seeing actually it just turns straight into a large language model creating some SQL, and that SQL has to understand the structure of the data. But like all of those kind of structured things still exist. And so it means that all of that context that you have to create around like what are the actual schema and what does it actually mean are still really there.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of really highlights like what does AI mean for the actual data itself. And I wonder if there's do you find that kind of difference in the unstructured data, and like what does it mean for people to actually manage their data?
Yeah, and it's this shift is massive for unstructured data. It's something that I think people have waited a long time for, because we think roughly, we hear this a lot being bandied around, about 80% of our data in government is likely to be unstructured, right? So that's 20 years worth of corporate memory right there. That's a huge potential asset. And in around, I think it was around about 2017, people in government really started to talk. They could see that the potential of big data could be applied to unstructured data at some point, and everyone was getting really excited about it and what kind of new insights that this might bring government, right? Because so much of the kind of intelligent analysis around government is locked away in its unstructured data. So if you take policy making, for example, if we can interrogate that corporate memory, what can we learn about policy making, about what works, about what doesn't work, about where policy fails, why it takes so long, for example, to implement some kind of policies. But the general direction of travel in government is that what we really want to do is to increase the amount of unstructured data that AI can reason over to really get to its value. But of course, to do that in government, what we've really got to do is to make sure that that data is properly prepared, particularly if it's legacy data, because in government what we've really got to be able to do is to trust the outputs that we get from large language models when we're running it with large over unstructured data, particularly if we're going to then make decisions based on that content. And also what we've got to make sure is that there won't be any data leakage while we're doing this. So that those are big challenges that work against us in some respects. So if you take permissions management, for example, that is a big problem. This is a really big blocker to the kind of acceleration of large language models across unstructured data in government, because if you take Copilot, for example, it will respect the existing permission structure that you have. In some respects, that's great. There's nothing specific that you necessarily need to do. But of course, what that will do is expose any inconsistent permissions that you have. It will expose an overly permissive environment. Also, of course, what it does is it draws context from across files, emails, chats. And so if your underlying permission architecture is weak, or if it's kind of overloaded with very, very granular permission structure, then those problems are going to really get exposed. Corrupted metadata is another one. So it's particularly over like 20 years or so of government content being migrated from one system to another, one organization to another, one team to another, the metadata really does tend to suffer during those migrations, and so of course that obviously is going to affect AI's ability to reason over it. Much more than that, actually, it just affects our ability as information architects to understand what that content is and what's in there, and whether it's of value or not. So there are many challenges that kind of impact the ability, I think, of government, the kind of ambition that government has to get value from unstructured data and large language models. Sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say, and that kind of is really true in the same in the kind of structured data space. But I think everyone's looking at all of these kind of documents and all of their kind of wealth of SharePoint, because you've got things like Copilot and who are sat on top of this wonderful store of documents. And everyone's kind of looking to all of those things to suddenly be the wealth of knowledge that we all have to make decisions on in our organizations. And I think from a data architecture perspective, we can just kind of go, okay, good luck, Jody. We're over here with all of our structured data that nobody's looking at yet. So we've got some time to create these wonderful analytical interfaces where you can just chat with it. And I think that's going to be the challenge, is like, how do we bring them together, and how do we then do that? And I guess, does that, like, we could chat forever and I'm very conscious of time. I guess, does that move us to the thing that we kind of always talk about, which is metadata is sexy again. And I think that is the one thing that we agree on, is that context is super important. And how does that start to surface in your world?
Yeah, so I think this is, for me, this is the key, that one of the key transformational, the key points around AI that I think that is transformational for information architects who work in the government KIM domain, that I think organizations are starting to rediscover metadata in terms of what it can bring. So its power to reduce hallucinations when we're using artificial intelligence, its power to optimize the outputs, to make its power to not just do the general kind of horizontal tasks that generative AI really shines at, but actually can we use it to do those really high precision tasks that actually could save government quite a lot of time and money, could save users quite a lot of time, but actually are going to rely on high assurance outputs. And also the power of metadata actually to reduce leakage as well. So leakage is not just about permissions management, it's also about context, and it's also around meaning as well, because it's, in this world of artificial intelligence and it drawing references and meaning from across different information stores and synthesizing it, actually it's much more than just permissions management, data leakage, and we think metadata can really help there. So it's really about purposefully using metadata to encode meaning into our content, so that it's not just about how humans can interact with that content, but how AI can reason over it. So I think we're going to see the return of things like metadata strategies, enterprise term sets and taxonomies into government. I think we're going to see more use of defined content types and trainable classifiers. Dare I even say it, across government taxonomy? I mean, that would just be fantastic. So but I really do think that that the value of meaning and how it's encoded into information is coming to the fore again.
And that is that's one of the things that the prototypes that that our teams are building at the moment that is most exciting, is we're looking at, like, how do you solve discoverability? Because for unstructured data, you've got the the location effectively of where it is. You've got all of those things you can like then use to search all of that great stuff. And we don't really have that for like data to find out like where is the data and what can you do with it. And I think that's the one of the prototypes we're doing at the moment is, can we use some of this like wonderful new AI technologies to search for all of these things so that you can find not just your documents and your things, but you can also find the structured data. You can like add that. And again, it goes back to having all of that context. And some of our teams are using some of the new AI standards to describe things. And that's where it gets really interesting around the use of AI to create the metadata that the other AIs are going to look at. But that requires, like you said, some of those really fundamental like government taxonomies. And if we say enough on this, it will definitely happen. Yeah, so I think there's the blend between both our worlds is like, let's never try and work out whether it was data or information ever again. And how do we start to, I guess, embrace each other's worlds a bit more? Which probably brings us on to our final ask. Jody, what is it that you think every IA professional must do?
So I think for me, I think it's about, I was sort of thinking about this as it's like discoverability plus now. So it's not just about discoverability anymore. We're not, information architects aren't just designing, I say just, because that's a hell of a task in itself. We have to design, we are designing systems, not just for humans to navigate, but also for machines to navigate now. And I think that is very new to us. It's really, really exciting. But I think what information architects have got to be doing now is purposefully coding in and coding meaning and governance into system design, as well as just meaning, so that it's not just can AI find everything everywhere all at once, but can AI discover reliable information for the right purpose, so that we can make sure that good decisions carry on being made in this new world that we live in.
I've got quite a few good questions, and I really like to ask some of them. So I think I'm going to suggest we overrun just by 5 minutes and just have a 5-minute break, because I think there's some really, really good questions here. Okay, my first question is, do you think, this is really good, do you think unstructured and structured data are mutually exclusive, or can they be on a continuum? Can unstructured data become structured? For example, finding decision trees that exist within the brains and inboxes of an organization. That's a good question.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is that unstructured data is starting to be, that systems are coming in that make unstructured data behave in a similar way to structured data, and the opposite is also true as well. You know, just things like vectorization and things like that. So that's really, really interesting. And I think you know, what that means is, potentially what does that mean? I think that the distinction to users is already blurred in government. We say data and information interchangeably all the time. I think for users, that distinction is going to become increasingly meaningless, and they will just expect answers. And what we will want to do as data and information architects is make sure that those answers can draw from both unstructured data and the highly structured data world, to make sure that those answers are much better and much more robust.
Yeah, that's totally good, really good answer. I'm going to go to the next question. Okay, this person asks, what's interesting about this is how much of current government content is highly unstructured. Aside from smaller experiments with modular content, what needs to happen with the Gov UK content estate to deliver this vision of a structured wonderland?
Can I insert myself into this question, because I'm very opinionated on this, and it is definitely not GDS policy that I'm going to talk about now. But Dan and I were talking about this earlier. What better trusted source of information for AI models to be trained on than gov.uk content? And one of the really interesting things that we're seeing is people like regulators who have legislation, they have guidance, they have use cases, they have things that some kind of hierarchy of like, this is the most important thing everyone needs to do. Here's the things that you should think about. And they're starting to create content stores to feed the AI to say, to start to tag some of those things. So I think if we want our world to exist and to be pushed out, then that is my wish for Christmas, because if we start now, we might do it, would be to kind of create that trusted source.
Yeah, there are more questions, but I must ask one question, which is, again, it's a really tricky one. Are you broadly pessimistic or optimistic about the use of AI?
Shall I go, and then Jody, you can have the last word. Optimistic, because I think it did a great job of helping us with our slides today, and also pessimistic because I think that it also, in generating these slides, I had to ask it many times to create a bit more diversity in the people that it was connecting to, never mind anything else. So I think it is a good reflection of our world, and that isn't necessarily the thing we want to create all over again.
Right, interesting. Jody?
Yeah,
go on.
Similar, very, I think, broadly optimistic, because I think it's enabling us to ask questions of our corporate memory for the first time, and that is going to be potentially transformational for new policy making and for transparency in government. But at the same time, slightly cautious, because I think it is changing the pace at which people are expected to work, and I think we need to be cautious around that.
Yeah, I heard a good quote last year at an AI conference, and they said AI will happen slower than you expect, but quicker than you can deal with.